I welcome you all to the next lecture in our anthropology series. But before we start, guys, this is the screenshot I've taken from Anthropology day 37, where I was just giving an example of Soro rate, and by mistake I said Levy rate. So please make a correction. It is on around 23 minutes. I just gave the example in terminology. I was just giving the example of Soro rate, but I by mistake said Levy rate. Okay, so please make a correction there. Right, so let's get started with today's lecture. Today we are going to start another school, that is cultural materialism, and the propounder for this was Marvin Harris, and it's a very interesting kind of topic, so you guys would like it. So let's get started. Now the thing is, you need to understand how things go and what is the thing that's going on. This school came as a reactionary to a lot of the available or the so-called popular thought at that time, which was more focused on, for example, उससे पहले क्या था, culture personality school था, right? Then there was structuralism was there, functionalism was there, right? So many schools that came before this, or when Marvin Harris gave his theory, the shift had happened, and the shift was towards more of a non-material culture. That means we were focusing on non-material aspect of culture, which was like more we were thinking of psyche, the psychological part, right? So we were thinking, right, that most of the non-material part, the beliefs, the morals, the values, the norms, they are the product of mind. They are, developed or structured in mind. So a lot of psychological element was added, and a lot of non-material aspect of culture was given value. But when we talk about any culture, right, any culture we are talking about, culture has two parts. One is material and one is non-material, right? So we know, even though the classical evolutionists, the diffusionists wanted to focus on both, but then they ended up only showing the material aspect of culture, and to react against or critique them, the schools like functionalism, structuralism, culture personality schools came in, and in a way they were focusing more on non-material culture, right? So Marvin Harris with his theory wanted to bring back the importance, or bring back the focus on the material culture, and how it also contributed or was a major part, right, in evolution of societies, cultures around the world. So this is the background where the cultural materialism school came in. You can see from the word cultural materialism that it is talking about the material aspect of it also, right? So you always need to understand the background in which the things are happening. If you do not understand, then you can't create the links. So now let's start. So basically this term cultural materialism was coined by Marvin Harris in his book, The Rise of Anthropological Theory. Okay, this was the book he wrote in 1968, and this book was a critique or a reaction against the cultural relativism and the idealism that was going on in the late 1960s. See, cultural relativism क्या होता है? That every you need to understand a culture from its ideology, its perspective, from the people who are living in that culture, right? That is culture materialism. And idealism is also like, you are focusing on their values, their ideology, all of that. So this was a reaction to those cultures, to those aspects, and also that they were focusing more on the non-material aspect of culture, and the material aspect was ignored. So Marvin Harris in a way said that if you want to make the subject holistic, that means if you want to holistically study something, right, then you can't ignore a big part of culture, that is material aspect. You can't ignore it, because you have to make your theory or your reasoning holistic. And if you're making it holistic and you're ignoring the material aspect, then how is it going to be holistic, right? So that was one thing. So his theory was based upon, you can say it had its influence from Marxist materialism, because Marx ने भी materialism का बात किया था ना, right? The bourgeois and the proletariat, and how the economic aspect of the culture dominates. That means economy is the first thing that is the dominating aspect. All of that was the materialistic aspect that Marx gave. And then the cultural ecology by Julian Stewart. So and culture revolution, right? So these were the influences in Marvin Harris's theory. That means उसने materialism का aspect लिया, but then he added his own dimension of reproduction, because Marx materialism में it was more or you can say only dominated by production aspect. Everything was dominated by the production, that means the economy, but he added his own idea of reproduction in that. We'll study about this, don't worry. And then he was also influenced by the cultural ecology school of Julian Stewart and the culture evolutionist school. We'll see this, how this goes into the methodology. We'll see this, right? And the objective that he had in the mind was to create a pan-human science. Now you need to understand what is this pan-human science. See, the point is, he wanted to give a theory which was, you can say, universally acceptable, and a very scientific logical theory he wanted to give for evolution of cultures, or how cultural changes take place. So every place, how the culture is evolving, or how the cultural changes takes place, he wanted to give a very scientific logical explanation to it. So he wanted to create a pan-human science. That means everywhere how humans culture evolve, changes. So he wanted to give a pan-human science to it. ठीक है? He was influenced by Marxism, Marx की theory, right? Then cultural ecology का theory and cultural evolutionist का theory, right? So I think you've got the brief background. So now let's start with the premises of the school. So this school explained the similarities and differences in societies based upon these three factors. I will tell you what are these factors now. See, he created a very unidirectional relationship between three things. Those were infrastructure, structure and superstructure. Now you try to understand, सब समझ आएगा, right? See, we talked about that his focus, cultural materialism, the school was more focused upon the material aspect. Not to say that it ignored the non-material aspect, but unlike the other schools like the culture personality, the structuralism, he was more inclined towards material aspect, and how material aspect of culture has a lot of bearing on the whole culture. So he was saying, if something which has more influence on the whole culture as such is the material aspect of it and not the non-material aspect, because इससे पहले they were saying that culture is a product of mind, the structures are created in the mind, you need to understand what the mind thinks, all of that, right? The structuralism and all of that. But he says no, the basic foundation of a culture is through the non-material aspect, and the material aspect, the foundation is the material aspect, and everything apart from that are mere constructs. That means, he said, construct क्या होता है? Something which you construct, right? That means he says non-material aspect is just a mere construct, and it is created to reinforce the material aspects of the culture. Now I'll tell you how. Basically, in infrastructure, he keeps the, you can say, the technology, the economy and reproduction. He says these are the basic things. Should I change the color? I think I should. Right. So basically he was saying infrastructure would be the technology, the economy and the reproduction. Now no. See, he believes that humans, they live for their biological survival. So whatever their needs are, food, shelter, protection, reproduction, these are the things which are going to dominate a society. So for food you need technology, right? Whatever kind of technology it is, whether it is hunting gathering, it is agricultural economy, it is anything, the technology is used to harness energy and food. Okay, then reproduction is also a basic need of man. Okay, so all those needs which are biological to us are fulfilled via the infrastructure, and infrastructure will have the technology we are using to harness that, the reproduction. So all this productive aspect would be the infrastructure. Now he says there are other two things, that is structure and superstructure. In structure he kept all the other organizational setups like kinship, like family, like political organization. Okay, all these things were kept in the structural part because in a way they are going to help in this. For example, if I take an agricultural economy, versus a hunting gathering society. ठीक है, hunting gathering में the kind of technology we are using is very basic. That means very basic baskets we can have, right? Some bow and arrows we can have, then some stone tools we can have. In agriculture we'll have the plows, we'll have other kind of sickles, we'll have proper houses, household and village based community, right? So the technology is simple here, and then how will be the society at large? So politics kaisa hoga? No politics, egalitarian society, right? But here, because the society has surplus, now the politics would be, there be leaders, there could be chiefdoms, right? There could be a village kind of economy. So in short, the technology, the production of food is dominating the other aspects, like how the political economy is going to be. तो family structure यहाँ पे क्या होता है? Very close bands होते हैं, ठीक है? Then kinship structures are very strong here. Here the family structure would be joint families, because you need people to work on the farms, right? But then there are hierarchies, right? In the family there are hierarchies, egalitarian nahi hoti families, larger families than the size of a band, right? So in a way, what technology, what production we are doing has a bearing on the organizational setup of the man also. So you're understanding ki how the infrastructure determines the structure of the organizations that a society has. For example, the polity, the family structures, the kinship structures, right? And then in the superstructure, he puts the ideological or the ideational part of a culture. That means how its religion is going to be, how the philosophy of the culture is going to shape. So he says infrastructure is also determined, superstructure is also determined by the infrastructure itself. Now how? For example, here the society is hunting gathering, right? So they take everything from their nature, right? So they can follow totemism, they can follow naturalism. That means in a way they are worshipping the nature, they are worshipping plants and animals. Agriculture may, there could be polytheism, right? Polytheism हो सकता है, or some other form of religion can be there. So this is how he says that ultimately everything revolves around the technology, the production, the reproduction. These are the infrastructural parts. Everything is determined on this. The structures and superstructures are mere constructs, and they are created to satisfy the humans basic needs or the biological needs of the man, which are technology, economy, reproduction. And it is a unidirectional thing. That means infrastructure will always determine the structure and superstructure, and it is not the other way around. What your superstructure is not going to develop your infrastructure. For example, hunting gathering society है, ठीक है, they are not going to follow monotheism first and then think, okay, now let's practice hunting gathering. No, hunting gathering was the basic thing, and from that other things evolved, like their family structure, like their polity, like their religious beliefs. And it is not the other way around कि अब हम totemism कर रहे हैं, so because we are worshipping the plants and animals, now let's do hunting and gathering. It is not like that. It is the other way around, because what they are doing is forming their ideology. You're getting my point? So basically everything first revolves around the first everything revolves around the material aspect of culture, and that material aspect we are going to derive from the infrastructure part, and then this infrastructure will further in a unidirectional way going to evolve our structures and superstructures, and it is not the other way around. Okay, so this was his whole idea. Now let's look at this. So now you will understand it. He said now if you have to say the or find the similarities and differences in societies, you can look at with the three things: infrastructure, that is the technology, production, reproduction; structural, the organizational setup and all, like family structure, kinship, polity, all of that; and then the superstructure, what is the ideology of a culture. So he created a theory based on these three parameters, and he said the effect of infrastructure on on structure and superstructure is unidirectional. That means it is not कि superstructure और structure भी infrastructure को influence करेंगे. No, it is only the infrastructure which is going to affect the structure and superstructure, right? Then he said that it is going to benefit both upper and lower class. Like Marx का क्या होता था? He said that only the bourgeois is going to benefit from the materialism. But here he deviated because he added the concept of reproduction in his materialism, कि reproductive needs are very important also, and वो भी infrastructural perspective से you can achieve them. And then he also said कि cultural materialism is going to benefit every section of the society, be it upper, lower, because it is created for every person, right? And he said infrastructure only to boost production and reproduction. So anything beyond infrastructure, that is the structure, superstructure, they are mere constructs. They are constructed to only boost the production and reproductive capacities. And infrastructure is also only how man can achieve his productive or reproductive capacities, which is its basic biological needs, basic needs basically. Okay? So methodology mein what he did, because he wanted to make a pan-human science of society, that means he wanted to make a very make a theory on society which was very logical or rational, right? And logical or rational कब हो सकती है कोई चीज़? when it is quantifiable, easily quantifiable or easily observable, right? So that is why he wanted to create his methodology on very quantifiable, verifiable data, right? That was the first thing. Then he gave a very interesting perspective of emic versus etic. Now I'll tell you. एक तो one thing which was different in cultural materialism was that it brought back the interest or the thought of material aspect in the culture, in the cultural perspective. That means how much material aspect is also important. एक चीज़ तो ये थी, because इससे पहले everybody was thinking about the non-material aspect. The second thing is he brought in a distinction between emic and etic. Now we had done it at the very beginning. I'll tell you what these two words are. Emic is a very cultural relativist perspective. That means if you are studying a society or a culture, you need to study that society or culture with its own perspective. That means if somebody in a culture is eating beef, for example, if it is a non-Hindu culture and if they eat beef, we should look at the perspective not from our own and from the bias of being a Hindu culture where beef eating is forbidden, because we believe that cow is sacred. We should not look at beef eating from that perspective, but the perspective of the people who are practicing it, right? That is what emic perspective is all about. We are being cultural relativists, that is what the emic perspective is. But the etic perspective, on the other hand, says that it is not always important to look at any culture from their perspective, because if you do that, sometimes your own sense of right and wrong, is challenged. For example, how much cultural relativism you have to practice. For example, if I take the example of sati, the people who are practicing sati, they are practicing it because they believe in it. So can you think about sati from the perspective of the people who are believing in it? Because you can very well see that it is not a good practice, right? So sometimes you need to have an outsider's perspective also. Etic is an outsider's perspective, or a perspective which is not from the culture. So you need to have an outsider's perspective and look at certain elements of culture and then believe whether they are right or wrong. And especially when anthropology's core philosophy is holism. That means we want to create those theories which are holistic in nature, which has many dimensions attached to it. But when we are ignoring the etic perspective, then how can our theories be holistic? So he's saying, you're trying, Marvin Harris believed that people are saying that we need to make holistic studies, but then you're not looking at the etic perspectives, you're not looking at the material aspects. So how are your theories going to be holistic? So this was also one distinction that he made, etic and emic. And he said not always emic perspective is important, sometimes etic perspectives are also very important. Okay? So this was also one of the methodologies that he used, that was using the etic perspectives. Okay? And जैसे he challenged many ideas. So etic approach was important for holism. Okay? And he concentrated on the things that contributed to basic biological survival. Basic biological survival हम infrastructure वाला part में बोल रहे थे, right? And then how it structure and superstructure का unidirectional relationship वो हमने देख लिया, right? Now, so mainly if I have to summarize you the whole thing, let's take 2 or 3 examples also to summarize what he was saying. We'll take one example of the cow in Indian culture or Hindu culture being sacred. So when he studied the Indian culture, when he saw that cows are thought of very sacred, तो अगर हम cow को sacred बोल रहे हैं, that is because we have a belief like that, right? We have a belief because we worship cows. That means somewhere down the line, in Marvin Harris's words, ये superstructure का part आएगा, because what our belief system ideology is the part of superstructure. So now let me draw the theory that he was saying कि how infrastructure would affect the structure and superstructure from this cow ideology of Indian culture. So now he said that basically pastoralism or the use of milching animals in Indian agricultural system is a lot important, right? And you have also read from the Rigvedic times when the importance of animals, the draft animals increased, right? They in a way said that we should not do the animal sacrifice, क्योंकि उससे पहले animal sacrifice was very common, right? Animal sacrifice किया जाता था. But when it was believed that now the requirement for animals is a lot more for dairy, for agricultural purposes, for people's economic aspect, for people's livelihood. When they were a lot important, they incorporated it in their ideology, because then animal sacrifice को कम करना पड़ा, and then we started to actually save the animals because we needed it for our economic lifestyle, right? For economy, for our livelihood, we needed them, and slowly and steadily we started to worship cows because they were utilized for the economic livelihood, right? So that is how our economic livelihood, because we needed it for our economy, people were pastoralists, people were depending upon the cows for milking and all of that, so they started to worship them to in order to save them from the animal sacrifice. So that is how the somewhere down the line the cow, the belief of worshipping it started. Okay, but any time when there is droughts, or there is in the earlier times when there used to be droughts or famines, or when there was scarcity of food, you can say scarcity of food was there, the male calves, the male calves were starved for food, so that they could be taken up as food. So that means when the need or requirement of the economy changes, just because you are not having food right now and you need to have food, so now you are killing the male calves. Okay, so this is how he drew a conclusion ki how economy is driving, or the infrastructure is driving the structure and superstructure. जब हमें, when we thought we needed cows and all of that for our economic livelihood, we started to worship it. When there is scarcity of food, our economy is changing because our livelihood is at risk right now, so we are starving the male calves to death and eating them. So this is how the whole infrastructure is affecting the structure and superstructure. Let's take one more example of World War and of World War II. Okay? In the times of World War I and World War II, a lot of males were out defending the territories, right? So even though the popular belief at that time was that female should remain at home, do the house, the domestic chores, and they should not go beyond their houses to work for economy. Okay? But when all the males were out, families ko to feed karna hai na, so a lot of females came out to work, right? Despite the popular belief that females should be at home. So the belief system or the superstructure was that females should stay at home. They should not, or the structure was females should stay at home. They should not go out, right? But the actual behavior was a lot of females were entering the workforce. That means because economy, our need for food, our need for survival made them to go out actually and work. Okay? That means economy again drew our belief system. Popular belief kya tha? Popular belief was that females should stay back. But actually they were not staying back because economy's needs had changed. Economy wanted them to go out, go work. So again infrastructure affected the structure and superstructure, right? Because structure mein kya tha? Female should stay at home. But now economy's need had changed. Males are outside defending the territories. So now females enter the workforce, infrastructure to keep the economy going, to keep the family structures going, right? So this is how he said infrastructure is the ultimate thing. We are all working towards achieving our infrastructural needs. These are paramount. These are mere constructs and these are only made to support the infrastructure. So I hope now you have got the theory nicely. ठीक है? So now let's look at the criticism. Now criticism तो बहुत था. many people criticize, because all those people who Marvin Harris was critiquing also, they also reacted, and all of that criticism to rehta hi hai, theek hai. Then Marxists believed that it was very vulgar materialism. It termed it vulgar materialism because they said that it relied too heavily on one direction, that is the infrastructure, structure and superstructure. So how this is going in one direction only, it believed that the Marxists said that the theory was too simplistic, too heavily drawn on one direction to explain the culture change. Okay, first thing was this. The second thing was idealized, like Durkheim and all. He said actually aisa etic emic, there is no need for this etic emic distinction, because eventually everything is driven because of the emic behavior, or from the behavior of the people who are practicing a culture. And everything came down to again cultural relativism, that emic behavior is very important. Etic behavior creates bias and ethnocentrism, because if we start looking at things from our perspective, then to we will start criticizing everything, that this is not right, this is not right, because we believe in it. Okay, we are not trying to understand what the people who are practicing believe, right? We are only thinking what we believe, we are only looking at things from our bias. So he says there is no need for etic emic distinction. Etic creates biases and ethnocentrism, right? And then postmodernist would be the last topic in this chapter which we will study. उनका तो full critique ही था science पे, that science is the product of a few elitist people of the society, the so called elite section of the society, because they can control the resources. They create theories or science in what benefits them. ठीक है. So he is saying कि postmodernists तो didn't believe in the idea of science itself, and Marvin Harris was saying कि हमको pan human science of society बनानी चाहिए. So on that the postmodernists had to critique, because they didn't believe in science only. Now this point you might not understand right now, because postmodernism is a full topic in itself, so I can very, very well understand that if you do not understand it, but as of now you think that they did not like the idea of science very well, so they had to critique, because Marvin Harris was saying कि हमको तो एक science बनानी चाहिए of society, right? So these were certain criticism that Marvin Harris theory got, and I hope you guys liked the lecture. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, guys, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you.